Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
Done. Hey everyone, happy to meet you here. This is our first sales talk in English. Usually we do it in Ukrainian, but with an honor to our guest who is English speaking, we will do this in English. And I think that all the
next time in Ukrainian, I promise.
Yeah,
next time.
Okay.
Give me a year.
Okay. Today, just a small intro about ourselves. We're Ira and Nastya, authors of the Sales Talk Telegram channel. We are trying to make sales automation, outbound, and all the sales life hacks as easy as possible to our friends from the sales community. And we have Elitsa over here. She is, as I said, the queen of LATAM. She's head of sales at Preply. I hope, is it by the way Preply or Preply?
Preply. It comes
Preply.
from, yes, preparation.
Ah, okay. I didn't know. So I hope many people know what Preply is, but maybe if Elitsa can give a little bit of the intro, that would be also amazing. So today the scene is yours. Our goal is just to
moderate
and ask the question.
And dance maybe on the background.
That's an easy part. So go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Irina. I wouldn't claim the title queen, but happy to share my experience, knowledge working in LATAM. And to take a step back, as Irina mentioned, I am managing the sales team at Preply Business. Many of you probably know Preply, as it is a Ukrainian startup, and we are the largest language learning marketplace for languages. So if you want to learn any languages, and great, Anna is using it, love it. I'd love to see users. If you want to, I am learning Ukrainian. I'm not there yet. I can say a few words, but if you want to learn any language, Preply is the way to go. A couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, we decided to start the B2B division of Preply, where we actually know what it takes for someone to learn a language in the most effective and efficient way, given that at Preply we have over 2 million active users, right? So we decided to take this knowledge and package a product for the B2B division and create kind of a program, like language learning program for organizations to be able to equip their teams to learn a language efficiently. And one of the reasons why we decided to start this is because we had so many requests from our B2C learners saying, hey, can you, I want to implement this in my company, can you do this for me? And we actually started understanding that some of this demand is coming not just from Eastern Europe and North America, but also Latin America. So naturally, we decided to start exploring that reason because we understood, fun fact number one for LATAM, so start writing here, is that only 1% of business community in Brazil, which is the largest economy, obviously in LATAM, after Mexico, speaks English. So lots of opportunities there. And that's kind of how we said, let's double down, let's buckle up and start exploring LATAM. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell. Just so you get an understanding, B2B was non-existent 3 years ago. At the moment, we have over 80 people working in B2B from regions from LATAM to North America to EMEA, now starting to explore MENA and APAC. We mostly sell outbound. So I just want to be clear, right, that my expertise, obviously we do have inbound, we do have a marketing team, but we actually started the B2B division fully outbound, and there's a lot of specificity in how to do outbound, especially in LATAM. So happy to share that we do.
Great. I remember you wanted to start with a poll.
Yes. So now you know a lot about me. Hopefully I'll get to know a little bit about the 23 people that are here with us today. So Irina, are we set to release the poll? I have 3 questions for you as the audience. So Irina, whenever you can release the poll, that would be great. And we want to know about you. So take a second, I'll start talking to fill this out so we get to know who you are, what you want to get out of this session, and how this will help us tailor the sessions to make them more relevant to you.
People have already started submitting the poll. So we have 6 people replied. As long as we get more or less to 27, I will let you know, and I will release the poll results.
Perfect, perfect. So please tell us your business. Did you sell to LATAM? So we know how much information to give more preliminarily versus more detailed. And then what do you want to get out of this session so we can focus on kind of the topics that we have prepared and the topic that you care most about.
Great. Let's wait for another 30 seconds. Okay. A spoiler, only 4 people already sell to LATAM.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
I guess we'll have little helpers here. So whoever those 4 people are, share your experience, right? This is a webinar where we all get to share our experience. So if you have understood something else or something different, please don't be afraid to raise your hand and let's share our combined knowledge.
Great. Okay, I'm ending the poll. We have 20 people who answered the poll. So I think it's more or less representative. Do you see the results right now?
Yes.
Okay.
So, interesting, right? Who do we have with us today? We have mostly outsourcing and tech, a few companies just for marketplaces. So that's great. We have quite a few good audience here, outsourcing and tech. Do we sell in LATAM? Only 20% do. We'll have little helpers. It will be a true panel with more speakers than me, Irina. So get ready. 80% not. So that's good to know. And then what would you want to get out of this session? 45 said you want to learn more about the advantages of selling in LATAM and kind of how to, you're planning to expand to LATAM and want to know how to do that.
Great. Okay. Anna, you are on mute.
That's because I'm receiving packages and it's a little bit noisy on the background. So sorry in advance. So let's start with questions then. The first question is, since you already have great experience in selling in LATAM, why do you sell in LATAM overall?
Yeah. Thank you for that, Anna. So a couple of reasons, right? The very first one, I'll throw a few numbers at you. I think numbers speak more than anything else. Think about LATAM and its approximation to the US, right? There are a couple big countries, and we'll talk about them, that do quite a lot of business with US. So they're powerhouses. There's a lot of business to be done in that part of the world. First number, first reason. Second one is, nearly 50% of the population in LATAM is online. That means we have a lot of young population, right, in LATAM, and so that economy will grow ultimately, right, that are online, and B, there is quite a lot of business to be done, as 50% of the population, that continent, are almost connected online. So that for those 2 reasons, I think almost if you're not doing business in LATAM, you're missing out. There's a lot of data that I can show you. The adoption rate of technology, of banking, of doing things online is on the faster pace. It's about 7% year over year versus APAC, which is 5.6%, versus Eastern Europe, which is almost 8%. So you can see how they're the online pace is growing, and that means that for businesses that exist online, it will be easier to target that audience.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much we're missing out.
Okay, and well, LATAM is a pretty big region, right?
Absolutely,
like very big.
Whole continent.
Yeah. Can we be a little bit more specific? Like which exactly countries should we target?
Yeah, absolutely. So to take a step back, Irina, there are about 33 different countries in LATAM, right? With different languages. Yes, the majority, besides Brazil, which is one of their major economies, the major economy, actually, they speak Portuguese, different Portuguese than Portugal. The rest speak Spanish, but there are some specific Spanish kind of preferences, right, that each country has. So when you think about 33 countries, right, the 5 major economies are Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, and Chile. Similarly for Preply, what we have identified 2 trends, right? First, Brazil is a bit of the outsider, right? Because it's the only country that does not speak Spanish. And interestingly enough, a lot of international headquarters are based in Brazil, where they operate for the rest of LATAM from Brazil. That's the first fact. Secondly, Mexico is quite interesting because obviously proximity to the US, certain parts of Mexico are quite, I would say, the way they do business is very similar to the US, but there's a lot of American influence there. So a really interesting region, very developing as well. The rest, Argentina, Colombia, and Chile, very specific way of how they do business. And again, you have to also take into consideration when you do business, not just these 5 big economies, but also what languages they speak, as I mentioned, in their political system, as well as currencies, because those are kind of specificities in that region that are quite important to understand well.
Right, and I'm curious, so we know how to sell to Europe, we know how to sell to United States in terms of channels, in terms of proposals and everything. How do we sell on LATAM?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that in terms of process, I wouldn't say in LATAM, this channel works better or that channel works better, right? I think the sales process, if you have a solid sales process and you're curious how to sell in LATAM, I would use the sales process. You have the base of the sales process, right? But you have to take into account the specificities for the market. So if there's one thing you can take out of this, right? If you have a solid outbound process, don't say I need to completely revamp it or I'm going to go full inbound there. I think if you have a solid base, try to use that and add the specificities of each of the market dynamics, right? First thing. The second thing I wanted to mention, right, is when you think about how to sell in a specific region, there are 4 different specificities, right? Partner selling, inbound over outbound, so marketing-led versus SDR-led. And then on the SDR side, hiring, where should we hire? So these are all like different specificities that we've learned while doing business there. I don't have experience with channel partnerships. So if you guys are not filled like and you want to do partnerships, I don't have experience with that. A lot of times in what I've read is that companies do recommend it if you really have no clue what to do there, to have some local partnerships to work with. On the marketing side, we wasted a bit of money going, silly us, right? Going there with English content. I mean, you think language learning company would learn that localization is the key. So I would mention, don't waste your money going with English or Spanish. You should know, I'm going to Mexico. Mexican Spanish is very different than Spanish from Spain. So try to do as much localization as possible if you want to go marketing with marketing efforts. Brazil, absolutely don't even waste your money with any other language than Portuguese, based on exactly what I mentioned. 1% of the business population speaks English, so your message will get lost. The biggest kind of how you sell there in terms of channel, like outbound is where I can add the most value here. So I will spend the majority of my time speaking about, all right, I want to do business in LATAM. A, how do I identify the countries that I want to work with, which I mentioned to you, the 5 powerhouses, and B, how do I do it? Like, how do I go there? And then to focus on outbound, right? The first thing to think about is, okay, what do I do with the team? Where do I hire them? Do I have, SDRs from Ukraine that speak somewhat Spanish go and prospect the region? Do I hire locally? Do I outsource? What is the right strategy? For us, we did 2 things in terms of deciding where to base our team. All right. First, actually, we hired the SDR team members to be based in Brazil, Mexico. Again, we go in the most successful countries for us are Brazil, 5 economies: Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Colombia, and Argentina. So we actually hired SDRs to be based in that there. However, the sales team is based in Barcelona for the time being. So we have actually salespeople that are based here, but they are all like from the region. And that has worked okay for us. Now we're going full scale, and we are planning to fully create a kind of a team there in the future, right? Just because we understood that in order to capture market share, it's good to test it from a different region, but in order to capture market share, it's very important for you to have team on the ground.
Local people, yeah. Do they do like online meetings, online callings, or is it more like offline? How do you do this?
So we do two things there. First thing is actually we do same, again, don't change your sales process until you really know that it's not producing your results. So we started with the same sales process online, right? Like everything happens online, the same thing. You find leads from Salesforce, and you put in your cadences only in the local language. The hardest thing first there is actually, in any other region, we've never faced this in such a prevalent rate, is actually finding the right emails. We have the highest bounce rate in there. Why so? Well, just think about it. Like in Latin America, they have 7-8 different names, right? Like it's so hard, right, for to get the right kind of email. So we had a huge bounce rate. So that was the first thing that we had to overcome. Second thing that we understood, Irina, that you can slightly change your process is it's like you guys love Facebook in Kiev, right? And Telegram. Like I just got into Telegram. I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening here? Similar thing, right? Specificity there. WhatsApp. If you get the WhatsApp of the POC, right? And you like that's like gold. It's like forecast that with high probability to schedule a meeting. So if you can get them on WhatsApp, like business is done on WhatsApp, right?
Is it only for Brazil, or it's for all the LATAM?
All LATAM. We see that Brazil, Mexico, again, Colombia. I can't comment in some really small kind of countries like Panama, but majority they do business with in WhatsApp. Now,
and how do you get? Sorry, and how do you get this the telephone numbers?
Yeah, so similar. So that's the hardest thing, right? Is like how to get phone numbers. A couple of things that we do. We actually do call company, like when you call the general office. I mean, sometimes you can make your way to find the cell phone number. A lot of times you have to play with the, to get you transferred. So that's kind of the hardest thing. Finding phone numbers and emails is very challenging in LATAM. I want to be very honest here. We're still struggling. We found a few loopholes that kind of work well for us, but finding contact is extremely difficult. So that's kind of the first thing. LinkedIn is our best friend there. Actually, we see especially our buying persona, our ICPs, HR directors, learning and development directors, quite are present there. So find actually your ICP and kind of understand if they speak a bit of English. If they're more working for international companies, they will have presence in LinkedIn. So we use widely LinkedIn, and then we found a few kind of providers to help us with contacts. And then the last thing is events. Irina, you are, like you asked me, like how we do that. That's the third thing we understood. Like event is like building relationship is the biggest thing in LATAM, right? In some countries like Eastern Europe, they're like, cut the bullshit. Please tell me how you can help me, and I want to get you out of my face as fast as possible. We're there. It's like you can't even talk about business.
Tequila.
Yes, before you drink with them, right? Before you dance with them, before you actually build a rapport, right? Like so, some of our biggest deals that have come, to Preply are from that region. But A, have an iron patience. If you're not a patient person, LATAM is not your region. And B, right, you have to be a relationship builder, right? So patience and being a relationship builder are the two skills, right? Obviously, the challenger approach and like selling the values is very relevant there as well. But if you don't build relationship and they can see that they can trust you, it's very tough to do anything else. Hence, the local language, right? If you speak with them in English that, or in a language they don't fully understand, it will be very difficult for you to do that. So these are kind of the nuances that you have to understand, right? Again, there are a lot of online events, find online events, join at least for educational purposes. That's what we did. We joined some of the biggest HR kind of events happening there. We got to know really interesting people. I wouldn't say that it was very good for us in terms of we sold right away, but we started building more understanding of the market from those events, of how are HR people thinking differently in that region, and those kind of like, they are relationship builders. They do use, WhatsApp. So we started understanding a bit more about that buying culture by joining these events. So biggest source for us, outbound. Inbound is still work in progress, and events for educational purposes.
And so what about the buying culture? So you just explained how the relationship building part works, but the entire decision-making process and the buying culture in LATAM, how is it different from the US?
Yeah, so US, very different, right? A couple of things I mentioned. The first thing is, again, very long buying process. Why is so long? Why is the process so long? Well, it very much depends if you're speaking with a big company or not. But generally, there is it's a huge hierarchical society. And what that means is, if, like we're speaking with HR directors, usually in any other region, they are decision makers. If they say, I'm buying Preply, it means they are buying Preply. They are the signers. In LATAM, not the case. Even if it's a really big company, you see that the CEO or somebody above HR needs that, you need the signature, right, from the CEO. And usually a lot of times our deals were blocked because the HR would never put us in touch with the CEO, but then the CEO would not trust the HR. So this kind of a power dynamics were really, really relevant. So that was the first thing, right? Understand that deals take forever because there's a lot of back and forth. And then where the most deals got stuck is because of that hierarchical kind of dynamics where the CEO knows most. They're the ones who say yes or no, but they don't want to, like, it's below them to look at your product, right? That's the edge. So it's like, how do I get involved? How do I educate them? Is, you have to understand each culture, each company's culture, and how you can go around it. And for us, what work is equipping the HR, like literally, like we're like, hey, how does your CEO make decisions, right? Like, what do they want to see? And actually building presentations, building collateral for them to sell Preply, so they actually kind of like have more the power. But again, if the hierarchical thing is very present, you have a hard time. So that's kind of the first thing, right? Like, I've never seen that anywhere else, especially in the US, it's completely different. But just understanding that is very important. Again, they never have budget, like we all use you guys know the BART model, like budget. If you use the BART model there, you'll never qualify anybody. So don't do it. That was our first mistake. We're like, no one has budget. Because when you start asking, well, what's your budget? Well, so they don't work in that way, right? Like a lot of actually big companies we've closed, they don't have timeline. Again, timeline is just exactly. So A, timeline, B, budget. Very hard to assess in the beginning. So what we did is understanding, do they have a really good use case we can help them? Are they losing money because their sales teams are not speaking, let's say, English, and all of their clients are based in the US? How can we make that case that they're losing money? A, CEO cares about money. We equip the HR to go help, right? And then having a strong use case and kind of understanding how to connect it back to the business impact really helped us drive A, budget, and B, timeline, right? So it's a lot of hand holding, right? Like you got to own them. You got to say, okay, this is how you got to do it. You have to build next steps. You have to consult them. You have to guide them. And if you do that in the US, you'll be really out very quickly, right? They're like, what are you doing?
It sounds a little bit like for LATAM, the best way to prospect is to do the ABM account-based approach. So when you do more customized approach to every single company, detecting their pain points and etc. So not mass outreach, right?
I mean, honestly, I don't believe in mass outreach to begin with, only if you really don't know your product market fit. So that's kind of how we that's kind of my rationale. But again, everybody has their own thing to go after. The main thing in LATAM is, do you know your product market fit there? Are you sure? Because if you do account-based prospecting, it's very time consuming. And if you only pick a few accounts, but you're not sure about your product market fit, you might actually end up wasting a lot of time. So that's my rationale in any region, but more so there is like, do you know your product market fit? Is it different in LATAM than it is in other parts of the world? Because for us, the use case was slightly different, right, than in the US, where it's like mostly for, people are buying language benefit versus really need that because your company cannot grow internationally unless, the workforce speak English.
Okay, and how do we structure our go-to-market strategy? What should we focus on first and most? How do we maybe go with the research, or what are the first steps we make,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the steps should be any different. I think the sales approach should be different, right? Like from what we've discussed, I think the first thing you should get to know that market, and especially get to know the competitor, right? What we did is we got to know who are our competitors there, right? Who are their clients, right? Like, so we understand like, okay, where would we fit? Because we all have competitors, but we have a specific value prop that we bring to that market, right? And then based on that, like what, for example, in LATAM, like we had to adjust. The second thing is adjust your product. Maybe you need to adjust your product slightly, right? So understanding the market, understanding the competitors, understanding the local preferences, these three factors, is your current standard product fitting there? Is the pricing fitting there? For us, honestly, it did not. How so? Two things, right? The first thing is that they learn in a very old-fashioned way languages, right? They want traditional books. I want to like follow specific curriculum rather than, like more learner-led curriculum. I want the teacher to tell me what to do rather than the learning to be driven by me. That's the first thing. Second is they love to learn in a group setting, right? That's kind of their more, when they make decisions, when they, like engage, they like that group kind of setting. So that's the second thing that was very different, right? In the US. In the US, it's actually an individualistic society. So understanding the specificities like helped us really adjust. And third thing is price. They are price sensitive, right? They have huge volume. So we can get probably, 5,000 employees to join Preply from one company, but the price will look slightly different. So knowing all of these specificities, we started adjusting our product. We're not there yet. I'm going to be upfront and honest, right? Like we're still making adjustments because we're learning more. But that's kind of what I would recommend, Irina, right? Research the market, understand the competition, research their companies they're working with, and then know what they're saying about, how good the competitors are, where can your business fit, and then how your product, knowing all of these things, how can you adjust your product for the local, needs and offering. And then outbound, I love outbound. I think it's so fun. It's borderless, right? Like there's no border. Just you have to figure out the language. But if you can find, I would personally start outbound. We still are not doing so well in inbound because again, like we don't really fully understand kind of how the with the language specificity, then the SEO and all of that is so different. But we can figure out very quickly. We hired a couple of people. We can figure out very quickly how to start. The process is the same, just the content changes, right? So that's kind of how we did it.
And I'm curious about the recommendations. So the way the network can work in LATAM. For instance, we worked with company A. How likely would they refer us as a good service provider or whatsoever to company B, who's their, I don't know, friendly company?
Yeah, great question, Anastasia. Actually, that's one of the things that we did early on is remember relationship building. Our second client ever at Preply was actually a LATAM company. It was an American company with headquarters in Brazil, and they had all of their LATAM presence, headquartered in Brazil, but all around. They want to provide English classes, Spanish, and Portuguese. And that person, we realized at that time, I started speaking with her, and I understood, okay, this woman really wants friends, right? Like, so I gotta be her friend before I sell to her. So we actually, up to this date, we still WhatsApp, remember WhatsApp. And then I understood that she has, like, I started following her on LinkedIn, and she has this huge following and organizing events from other, with other HR people. And so then I understood that she has this kind of HR following, and she started recommending us, right? Like, we started doing webinars with her. She started recommending us to a few of her HR friends. And I wouldn't say that that's how you would really grow.
Scale the sales.
Definitely get a few good leads. And secondly, she was a huge referral to us up to this date. A, the company is really good and powerful, so everybody knows it. And B, she really loves the value of Preply, sees it firsthand. We built some of the product features for her because of her feedback for the LATAM market. So she was a source of information for us, right? So build relationships, ask questions like, hey, tell me more about this market. I'm curious, right? So she was a great source of information, not just for leads, but referrals and understanding how the HR people there think. And I always ask, hey, if you were to do this, what do you think? How would that be perceived in that market? And she gave me quite valuable insights. So it worked well for us.
Great. So if I understood correctly, just a final question from my side. Sorry, I'm just curious. When we are talking about US or any European country, then the referral program works that we offer some benefits, regardless of whether we provided some good services or not. Still, it works based on the referral program. So in LATAM, if I understood correctly, it's more based on the human factor and sort of mixture.
Correct. I think it's based on relationship rather than, right, like quid pro quo, I give you this, you give me that. It worked really well for us in terms of, again, like it's a society that truly values relationship building. At least that's what we identified. So I think that factor would be a lot more beneficial. I just don't know how scalable that is. I wouldn't think that we'll grow so quickly, but at least in the beginning, 80% of you guys are looking how to enter that market. Again, where you find your ICPs. I actually linked this girl. I found her on LinkedIn, and I said, "Can I talk to you? Like, this is, we're looking to get to that market. What would you know?" Turned out she was recommended to me by LinkedIn because she was a Preply user, but I didn't know. So it was a really funny thing how we met on LinkedIn a while ago. She was not like super active. So reach out to 5 people on LinkedIn that you believe there will be your ICPs, and don't sell to them. Ask them for their feedback. How would this be perceived? This is what I'm doing. Hopefully they can speak English. So look for big international companies. But that's kind of what I would do to first understand more about the market. And then knowing that, you never know, they might turn to your customers, but if not, you get good insights. So relationship building is big there.
Great, thank you so much.
Maybe we usually do the sales talk not more than 40-45 minutes. Can we wrap it up with your recommendations or lessons learned, like main lessons learned for the LATAM market, for those who are planning to enter it or are already working but would like to master it somehow?
Yeah, sure. This would be a good summary, right, of kind of what we've discussed. I'll start with the very first one. We started with the markets in LATAM, right? It's a big region, and first thing I would recommend you do is pick a couple of markets, if not one, where you believe, right, you would be successful in. And I'll give you an example. Mexico, very specific market, very different than the rest, as I mentioned, closer to the US. Brazil, Portuguese speaking, adds a bit of complexity. We also have, Chile, Colombia. So just research, and find that the market works well for them, and understand kind of their own specificities. Argentina, we picked actually Argentina. We thought it's a great region, export of wine together with Chile. Little did we know that actually Argentina has a kind of embargo on how much kind of, you can, a company can spend that is based in Argentina outside of Argentina. So for example, if a company wants to do business with us and pay money in the US, they have up to $10,000 that they can do that. Afterwards, they're charged 40% tax. So you think somebody would want to, do that? So these are kind of specificities, right? Pick a market and don't say, let me now go full blast all my campaigns there. But maybe just do a bit of research on the specificity so you don't waste so much time and money. And then you realize, well, actually, I can't do business there. So focus on one region and really do a bit of research before you go there, right? Then the second thing is, again, decide on the channel. I think outbound is borderless as long as you find, people that speak the local language. For us, it worked well. LinkedIn is your best friend. So that's, we use the same sales process, did not adjust much until we understood the specificities of that market. So that's the second thing. Third thing is the sales process is slightly different because of the culture. But it's going to be not your friend there. You would not know the timeline or the decision maker. They all think they're decision makers or, the budget. So don't disqualify your leads because of that. Get a very strong use case and you guide them. So that's kind of the last piece I want to add here is you have to know how you sell your product and guide them through it, right? Like you have to have strong presence and guide them rather than if you leave them and they say, thank you, this was great, I'm definitely buying.
They're not.
Exactly. And yes, there means does not mean yes, because in Eastern Europe, they say yes, the contract will be signed tomorrow. Yeah. Really not the case in Latin America, right? Yes means good, yes. You got to really poach because yes can mean leave me alone and I don't ever want to see you, but they're very polite, right? So again, though, that kind of cultural dynamics, right? Like no decision-making power, hierarchical society, no timeline or budget, and then the kind of the difficulty of really expressing and saying straightforward. So you have to read between the lines. Those are the cultural components we've identified. So those are kind of right the several things. Focus on the region, do the research, use your current process if it's outbound. With specificities on the language and then understanding this kind of cultural specificities, be mindful of your BANT model, right? Of, how you qualify and how you sell.
Thank you.
It was powerful.
This was really amazing. And a lot of questions which we had, I think for the majority of people were already, I see a little bit of similarity of selling to China and to LATAM. So a lot of like WhatsApp on their hand, it's WeChat, building the relationship, going through having local people in the country to sell. So it's pretty much similar to what LATAM is doing. We have, yes. You wanted to say something? No,
I would say slightly different, right? Like the relationship
exactly.
part is definitely not part of it's a very individualistic society in APAC. Well, more of a, kind of getter, like getting together and making decisions together. And, again, the hierarchical part is very strong there, but yes, you're right. It's okay. Very different buying behavior.
We have maybe a couple more questions, a couple of minutes for some questions from our attendees. By the way, we had overall 30 participants, which is pretty good. So in case there are people here who are already selling to LATAM, you can also speak up. A question to you, how many times do you need to touch your cold lead before the first meeting in LATAM?
Yeah, good question. I would say our, again, buying process and scheduling process is a lot longer. So if I were you, I would kind of make it 30 to 40% longer than what you usually have. And a lot of it is like, you should do more educational things, more about them. Like I found you say this thing at this conference in your cold outreach. So again, like that kind of like, I know so much about you. I want to be your kind of friend. I get you is what makes a difference there. But I would not say like how much longer specifically, but for us, our cadences were quite much longer. Like if a regular cadence for us was 2 weeks, there was about 3.5 weeks. And so I would keep it and then always recycle, right? Like don't forget in 6 months, if a lead was not ready to buy and you have the email, recycle all the time because emails are gold. But longer, I'll do it much longer, and I'll start, you can always like say, okay, I'm going to make it 30% longer and see when, and then look at the data and adjust accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Some more questions from the ground, from people.
And Irina, I saw one question we had in the beginning with Ilya said, what are the main differences in communication between US and LATAM sales? Should we, I feel like we slightly touched on this.
Yeah, but you can extend it because you have already answered it a little bit, but if you can extend it, that would be great.
Sure. As I mentioned, Ilya, it's very much depends where in LATAM, right? So if it's in Mexico and then, the Mexico part that borders with the US, you might want to use kind of a different approach. But overall, very different buying behavior, very different culture. That's why I think sometimes when you try to sell from the US to LATAM, unless you hire very local people, it will be very difficult, right? To be successful. So communication, again, very different. Americans are a lot more straightforward. A, B, they're not so much in the, relationship building and small talk is important, but in LATAM is a whole nother level. C, like chatting on WhatsApp. I don't think that half of the Americans know even WhatsApp, to be honest with you. Like it's not, unless they have international friends. So just very different way of doing business, right? In that regard. And very long sales cycle and very not straightforward answers, which in the US, they will tell you, thank you, I'm not interested, right? They will say that, and they can make the decision. There's no that hierarchy of power games where in LATAM is very relevant.
Great. Here is another one about ratios. So what's your ratio of inbound to outbound leads?
So for us, the majority of leads, like 60+% come from outbound. Actually, just last quarter, we started, again, as I mentioned to you, we do not have a very, I would say we just started building our inbound team. So if I say that we are very strong inbound, I would like to not at that stage, so a lot to work on in that part of the world. The main thing that we found out was exactly the localization, that English absolutely don't waste your money. Even if we targeted big international companies and this and this and this, it did not work for us. And actually we did a couple of LinkedIn campaigns, not exactly SEO, but completely failed. In terms of SEO, I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not the person who actually is an SEO expert, but I can tell you that the reason why it didn't work was A, localization, and B, if you have localization, then you have to look the search words and all of that is very different. So we're not there yet.
And there's also a question regarding the decision makers. Who are the key decision makers in LATAM in case they're also trying to sell, like, and not also, but trying to sell an LMS platform?
Yeah.
Is it sale, owner, manager?
Yeah, so again, it depends how big is the company, right? If you have a bigger companies, if you go for like a really big, P&G, I can tell you that most likely it's an LMS. It's a huge change structure. Most likely they probably will need an approval from the headquarters. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. How big is the company? And for example, we've sold to a lot of big international FMCGs. And depending on A, the dollar amount, and B, on are we touching one department or across the departments, the decision makers might be based in headquarter location, right? So that's the first thing to remember. If it's a startup, let's say you sell to eBanks. I don't know if you guys know eBank, one of the biggest fintechs, unicorns there that we work with. If you sell to eBanks, it's a startup with quite big. But probably for us, the decision makers there, you never believe, were HR analysts. HR analysts closing 6x digit deal. I was like, oh, like that was one of the biggest deals we've closed, and I almost fell from the chair because I was like, can I talk to your manager, please? How can you be an HR analyst and make decisions? Like, I mean, how silly of me, right? I was like, who is the HR director? Well, and then turned out that we actually were able to close, right, the deal, which is so unusual, right? Like from what I've discussed. So that's why you have to understand, like, is it an HR? Is it a startup that is super, forward facing, that, they can make decisions on their own? You always have procurement and always have legal, and lots of legal paperwork, just so you guys know. If it's a bigger deal, always lots of legal paperwork, always procurement, and then finance involved. So hopefully I was able to answer, but the answer always depends, right? Deal size, the industry specificities.
Okay, Artur is thankful. I think he's thankful.
Sure.
Everybody,
Thank you for
everybody is very thankful. Thank you for joining. It was really amazing. We will save the video. We will share it with the community, because many people were saying that they're having meetings and they cannot join, and we cannot leave them without this powerful knowledge you have shared. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, sales community, for joining. It was pretty amazing. And I think that we'll do something similar maybe in a period of time when Elitsa will be sharing some more insights on not the LATAM region, but something else.
Yes, absolutely. Irina and Anastasia, thank you for inviting me. And so wonderful to see 20 awesome people joining us today. Thanks for that. And again, happy to have another session at any time. This was fun. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.